Okay, so we are in the lesson entitled Pondering Proverbs, and we're turning to Proverbs chapter 6 for our purposes here now, and we'll be in chapters 6 and 7 for our time here tonight. So perhaps we should go ahead and read some of this in order to get familiarized here. I'm going to read chapter 6. Would I have a volunteer to read at least part of chapter 7? There's Ed over there. And so we'll do, Ed, if you want to do like the first 13 verses. And does anybody else pick up the end of it? Yvonne? Okay. I saw Yvonne's hand first. Sorry, Jim. First 13 verses of 7. And then Yvonne will do the end. So I'll get started with Proverbs chapter 6. And then we'll do the questions. My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself, plead with your friend, give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes, he shuffles his feet, he points with his fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. My son, keep your father's command, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart, tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you, and when you awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of a seductress. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her allure you with her eyelids. For by means of a harlot a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire to his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals, and his feet not be seared? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore 7-fold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Whoever commits adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He who does so destroys his own soul. Wounds and dishonor he will get, and his reproach will not be wiped away. For jealousy is a husband's fury, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will accept no recompense, nor will he be appeased, though you give many gifts.
My son, keep my words and treasure my commands within you. Keep my commands and live, and my law is the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youth a young man devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner. And he took the path to her house, in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. And there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. She was loud and rebellious, her feet would not stay at home. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him. With an impudent face she said to him,
I was due to offer peace offerings. Today I have paid my vows. Therefore I have come out to meet you, to seek your presence earnestly, and I have found you. I have spread my couch with coverings, with colored linens of Egypt. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us drink our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with caresses, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him. At the full moon he will come home. With her many persuasions she entices him. With her flattering lips she seduces him. Suddenly he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as one in fetters to the discipline of a fool, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare, so he does not know that it will cost him his life. And therefore, my sons, listen to me, and pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many are the victims she has cast down, and numerous are all her slain. Her house is the way to Sheol, descending to the chambers of death.
All right, thank you. Lengthy reading tonight, but now we'll move on into the lesson. The lesson aim at the very top is to learn the sorrow and misfortune that comes upon the man that rejects the wisdom of God concerning an appropriate life. And so as we move on to question number 1, what does Solomon say has happened to one who has become surety for his friend or for a stranger?
he's been snared by the words of his own mouth.
Yeah. Now, just for clarification, what is this surety speaking of?
One who assumes the responsibility of someone else.
Okay. And so how those words kind of come back and bite you sometimes. Yeah, the simplest idea that comes to my mind is co-signing for a loan for somebody. Is what we're talking about. I know somebody, one of my family members, that did such a thing and ended up having to pay for a truck that he didn't want. The person skipped town and he ended up having to pay for that truck, and it put him, he was not in a position where he could easily do that, so he had to struggle with that and until it was paid off. And that was there's some wisdom there. There's some wisdom there. Oftentimes we don't learn as human beings until we're in the situation and we've come through it, and then the learning sets in. And I always told my driving school students, you want to listen to these videos that I'm showing you. You want to listen to the stories that I'm telling you about driving, because you don't want to learn the lesson firsthand, because it might be in your last breath that you learn that lesson. And in the same ways, spiritually, we have here some good wisdom that if we follow it, we don't have to fall victim to these very same things. And that's the whole point of what we're looking at here today. Even though this was written a long time ago, these things still apply to us today, and we can take some good wisdom from them. So what does he suggest this person do?
Humble themselves and plead with their friend.
Yeah, to basically be released of such a thing. Yeah. So that's something that humility takes care of a lot, doesn't it? If we will just be humble in our ways, we can avoid a lot of the snares that would entrap us in life. We live live in a world full of, I'm searching for a word here, the opposite of humility. What am I looking for? Pride, thank you. We live in a world full of pride, and there's a lot of that showiness and that pridefulness going on.
I was going to say, that it seems as today's society has a lot of, look what I can do.
Yeah.
And that sometimes, the true anonymous donor to someone who goes out of his way to become anonymous, that's the one who's humbling himself, right?
Yeah.
Not the one that says, I want to be at the top of the list.
Yeah. I watch an interview, sort of long form interview video every so often. There's a guy that goes around the world and talks to people in different cultures and in different that live in different ways of life. And his most recent one, he was interviewing a man who was a wealthy real estate guru or agent, done quite well. And this guy was showing all of his cars and his fancy stuff and his shiny things, and he had a chauffeur driving them around and stuff as he showed them all the wonders of his accumulation of wealth. And I just shaking my head, sitting there and thinking about how empty that really is. He's got all these shiny things, and that's where the hope of his life is. You can see it. Yet he's not thinking, he's not humble at all. He's not, he's telling you, look what I did. I did this. And there's a complete lack of humility there. And it's, when we see things like that, it should make our stomach turn a little bit. It should make us, it should repulse us, because we know that the Lord desires us to be humble. And when we catch ourselves not being humble, or when we're caught not being humble, and we receive correction, as we're going to get into a little bit. One of our brethren, if we correct each other and say, hey, I don't think you should do that. This is probably not a good idea. Don't take that and get angry. Don't run off and get angry, but take that correction and be humble. That's a lesson that we'll get out of this, and we get out of many areas of the scriptures as well.
One of the things that I see quite often, and every once in a while, I guess I'm just as guilty as anybody else in doing it. I like to draw or paint, and I'll come up with a painting that I think is, fairly good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll make the mistake of saying that this was something that I created, but not give God the credit for giving me the talent to do it.
Right. That's a good point. That's a really good point. And one of the most powerful things to the detriment of our society is social media today. And that's a lot of what it is. It's look at me, look at what I have, look at what I did, look at where I am. And that's something that, I've fallen victim to that trap. I've caught myself in that, and I personally, I attempt to stay away from such things. But boy, it's a strong desire, isn't it, to want to show people the happy things, the good things in your life. And there's nothing wrong with sharing in the good, but when you really get down at the root of why am I putting this picture on social media, it really has its root in pridefulness. When we make the post, do we give the glory to God and say that that God gave me the ability to get this? Do we choose our words wisely, and do we include God in those things? Just as I know that there are several here that are in the habit of saying, if the Lord wills. If the Lord wills, I'll see you on Sunday. Some of us will be saying that to each other this evening. And there's some good wisdom in that, but sometimes we forget. And that's
My dad said that all the time.
Yeah.
Lord's willing, I'm going to go look for a new car tomorrow. I mean, that was just, he said about everything.
Yeah, and it throws people off. In the world, It throws people off, but it's also a good place to start a conversation. You know, someone might say, well, why do you say that? And then there's a good teaching moment. Did you have your hand up, Charles?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, you mark down and take up those ideas on things to do with sermon. You could do several months of Sundays on social media and things, but to the point in that social media is an influence of many things, right? So if you equally put on social media what we continually do, but don't put on there where you're at on Wednesday, or this church's case a Thursday or a Sunday,
Yeah.
what are you doing there? What cost does that cause, right?
Right. There's some good to be had there. You know, you can keep in touch with people over long, from long distances and so on. There's some good to be had, but boy, it's hard to stay on the good part of it.
Yeah, and even to another point, it almost contradicts what I just said in that there's a good that the world can see that you attended church, but the contradiction to that is, are you putting that on there so the world can see, or are you putting it on there to check your box? Right?
Yeah.
Because at
Right.
the end of the day, we should go unnoticed.
Yeah.
But we also want others to see that we're on the right path.
Yeah.
So there's a fine line there that, God has pretty good rules on what we should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It all comes down to humility. And then next, as far as question number 3, what example does Solomon suggest the sluggard follow? What's the example he gives? The ant. Yeah. Yeah. And, if you watch an ant, if you've just had the time in your life to sit and watch a colony of ants, and they're busy, they're lining up and they're doing the work, and they are just at it, and they don't seem to tire or slow down. They just keep at it, and they're so little, but they can do so much. I mean, you remember the cartoons. I remember watching cartoons when I was a kid where the ants would get underneath of some big object and move it, that's not far from the truth. I mean, they can do quite a bit, but the issue there is that they stick with it, and they just put their nose to the grindstone and work. And that's a good example that we get here in Proverbs 6. What questions does he ask the sluggard?
How long will you slumber?
Yeah, and when will you rise? Yeah, and so, what's the sluggard? We don't use language like that often anymore. What's that?
Isn't it lazy?
Yeah, lazy person. One who basically, refuses to work. They're in the next part of the question, what will the result of his refusal to work be? Poverty. It's no guarantee that if you work hard like the ant that you're going to be wealthy, but boy, I'll tell you, there's a much greater chance. And not to mention that whether it be, physical things, we don't even have to make that application, in spiritual things. We may be the most industrious person on earth, and we may have put ourselves a nest egg back in the vault, and we might have all kinds of money there to show, and things to show our industriousness as human beings. But are we sluggards when it comes to spiritual things? Are we sluggards when it comes to evangelizing and sharing the truth with others? That's when will you rise? Poverty in the spiritual sense will be that those people that stand before the Lord and he says, "Go away from me, I never knew you." What is the inheritance that we are in having the hope of here is everlasting life, and that's the riches that we need to follow.
So, my dad had a saying growing up, and he loves to say, lazy people work the hardest. It takes you a half a lifetime to really get what he was saying here. Now that I'm more of an adult, I I truly understand the meaning of that.
Yeah,
That if you try to get around something instead of just going through it,
yeah,
you will work harder than if you just did it right the first time.
yeah. And in a spiritual application, if you take the lazy way through your spiritual life, when you get old, when you haven't set your ways to that of the Lord, it's going to be that much harder to put away all those things that you've attached yourself to.
Right. It was a couple of Sundays ago at Southeast in Mogador. The preacher there was a guest speaker. I believe he's a member there. And his whole sermon, which can be summed up, is that I believe it was his grandmother took 12 years of going to church, and she touched someone and taught them the ways, and that person was in a family that was very much against her. And even from a little girl on up, and it took almost 2 generations. But if it wasn't for that moment, that he wouldn't be where he's at today. And no one saw the fruit of 12 years of labor. You don't see the instant gratification. They made many enemies with the parents along the way, all the things that you miss out on. But by changing that one person, that she became a mother who taught the Christian way and started a whole generation of dedicated Christians to this day.
Yeah.
So we don't always see the fruits of our labor, and if we can get away from society that we need an instant gratification for everything, we can learn to prosper and go forth and do many great things. You just might not see it in this lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely true. What does the writer say the naughty person, the wicked man, will do?
Well, apparently he does a lot, because it says he lies, he winks with his eyes, signals with his feet, points with his finger, devises evil continually, and spreads strife. Yeah,
I took the lazy way out there and wrote verse 13 and followed it on. But yes.
Are you saying you're a sluggard?
Yeah, I was a sluggard when it came to that. So we see there the fruits of a naughty person, a wicked man. Perverse mouth. Do we know anybody? Can you think of anybody that has a perverse mouth? You think of these things paint a picture, and those that devise evil continually. I mean, there are those people on this earth. There were those people on this earth in the days of Noah. What was it said about them? They think of evil continually. Their hearts are set on evil continually, I believe is what it says. And that same vein is still alive today, because mankind is mankind, and it's where we put our focus. So starting at verse 16 then, what 7 things does the Lord hate?
17, 18, and 19.
Exactly. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood.
I'm surrounded by sluggards.
I did the same thing there. Hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. So those things. And so as we read this, instead of just running through it, we should be asking ourselves, do we have a proud look? Do we have a lying tongue or hands that shed innocent blood? I hope not. A heart that devises wicked plans. I mean, each and every one of us has probably devised a wicked plan in our life at some point. We've probably been there. But
you do have children, right?
Right. Right. So, that is something that we may have done, but is it something that our heart is seeking after? If it's something that we did, we realized, we repented, we turned away from that, that's that's not what this is talking about, but it's a heart that just is continually devising wicked ideas and thinking of the next way to sin. You know, I think you can think of like a person who is addicted to drugs. You know, just looking for the next opportunity to get a hit of whatever substance, you know, that they're looking for. And sin is every bit as addictive as any drug. And those that are consumed within sin in their lives, they're just looking for the next opportunity. And that's an awful way to live. It's an awful way to live, to be subject to something like that. What actions and characteristics of the evil woman is the young man warned against?
24 and 25.
Is that right? What is it about the evil woman that is so attractive?
She
What?
has a flattering tongue, and she has alluring eyes,
Yeah.
and she preys on the precious, I'm thinking the innocent people is what
Yeah.
she preys on.
Yeah, beauty and allure, and it's easy if we are not careful to be taken down in that. Which one of us hasn't been overtaken by someone who flatters us with their words? You know, at some point in our lives, we've probably been there. Maybe we've been the one doing the flattering. You know, thinking back to the first century church and the statement of "and such were some of you." You know, just because you're in the church doesn't mean that you've never lived that way. We all know that. And for those that are seeking the truth, you know, the Lord can deliver you from any of these things. But anyway, you know, it is the beauty and the allure. You know, it's deceiving. You know, there's all kinds of fairy tales speaking about the being taken in by the beauty and allure of something. I mean, Snow White. You know, what is? You know, that's one of the whole points of that. And it's been throughout society, throughout the ages, that has been something that we've warned our children about. But here it is. This book of Proverbs is older than Walt Disney, and it warned us all those years ago. Warned mankind about such things.
Hey John, can you read 26?
For by means of a harlot a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life.
That's what I thought. My version says, but a married woman hunts down a precious life.
In verse 26?
ESV.
Well, I suppose to,
Mine says adulteress.
yeah, I suppose to be an adulteress would have
That's
to
a
be.
married person.
Yeah.
It has one of those little note things, and I click it, says, Hebrews, a man's wife.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's, you know, there's no doubt that happens all the time today. We can probably, sadly, within our circle of acquaintance in the world, can think of someone who this has happened to, or someone who has done such a thing. I mean, it is all too common.
There's a note in hers, and it says that being with a prostitute could be as cheap as a loaf of bread, but having an affair with a married woman, or man in this case, can cost the man his very life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, obviously, it doesn't even have to be as much as a loaf of bread. It could be completely free
Yeah.
in today's society, but it's the point of the sin, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also good to note here that when we're talking about like the beauty and things of that nature, it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It doesn't necessarily have to be even the opposite sex in some cases. Right? You can be flattered by a coworker or a boss going above and beyond saying good job or offering you something or in exchange or in lieu of, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of modern ways that they have gone around these exact terms.
And just to make some kind of application, look today at the religious world and look at all the flattering words and all the flowery words that are put out by those that are claiming to be of Christ. And people are seduced by those words and by that message of just pure happiness and joy with no speaking whatsoever about the severity of God. You know, and so you can be, to make that application, you can be seduced by flattering words in that direction, that way too.
Yeah, to add to that point, look at a lot of the religions or the super churches, right? The sermon will start off with 3 verses that you're looking up that follow word for word, but then he misuses the context of them, and from that point on, he's got your attention into whatever he wants to preach about that day.
Yeah,
And the band comes on and the
So,
show begins. And,
nothing but a motivational speech.
if that,
Right.
honestly, it's more or less negative at that point, right? You're misusing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's one in particular that I've spoken about many times that gets up there at the beginning of his lesson, holds up his Bible, and says something to the effect of, "This is my Bible. I love my Bible, and I cherish it and follow it every day of my life." He puts it down and never opens it again, and just tells stories, and that's just unconscionable. But anyhow, you know, we can be seduced by the allure and the beauty of many things. And yeah, being, you know, figurative, it doesn't necessarily have to do with these, you know, with an evil woman in particular and adultery in particular. We can make those applications in other places of life as well. So, to what will such a woman lead a man? Reduced to a crust of bread, and we kind of talked about that. You know, and you had what in your version was speaking of, you know, the services of such an evil woman could be as cheap as a loaf of bread. And you know, on the other hand, you know, what do you think of a crust of bread? What comes to your mind? Anybody here guilty of cutting the crust off of their bread? Or when you think when you think of the crust of like a hard flaky crust on bread, sometimes it just kind of disintegrates, just has no substance.
Mine says a loaf of bread.
A loaf of bread? Okay. And that's probably
That's what this one says.
okay. That's probably the best way to perform exegesis on that word then.
What's wrong with a loaf of bread?
Huh?
What's wrong with a loaf of bread?
Oh no, but it can get you into trouble.
I think it's in reference to, it's probably one of the cheapest forms of food.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Maybe
and-
then.
say that again.
Maybe then.
All right.
John,
Uh-huh.
I used the verse 32 where it says that, let's see, the one who commits adultery with a woman is lacking sense. He who would destroy himself does it. So it's the destruction of him.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Number 9, in warning against adultery, the writer compares the act to what?
I thought it was walking on hot coals.
Yeah. Walking on hot coals, in verse 28, can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? You know, that's we understand that you're going to get burned when you deal with such things. Although men can forgive a thief who steals to satisfy his hunger, when he repays what he has stolen, he will not forgive a man who commits what sin?
Adultery.
Mm-hmm. The writer encourages the young man to take wisdom and understanding at his kinswoman that they might keep him from whom?
An adulteress.
Yeah. And I have a note in mind, the kinswoman being a sister, one who has, your best interest at heart, one that will lead you in the right direction. And that's true in many cases when we have in our heart set to go do something and to sin. If we have one that would intervene, one that would put us on the straight path, who can see, I think you're going a little astray here, and can help snap some sense into you. That's what we need, and that's what the brotherhood is supposed to be. And brethren are supposed to do that one for another, and be the watchdog. Were you going to say something?
I've heard that said before, right? There's always the one. And then what would you say society's typical responses in that? And I would have to say that the typical response is, well, they just don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't see the whole picture. No, I think they see way more clear than we do. Sin allows us to be fogged.
Mm-hmm.
It allows us to not see clear. And
Yeah.
the brethren that tries to help us, we shouldn't necessarily take harm to them or heed their warning. They're trying to have us in heaven with them, right?
Yeah, and it's you get into emotions and you get into hurt feelings anytime you make a correction with our children. With our children, it's hurtful and painful sometimes to make the corrections that need to be made. Sometimes it makes them sad. Sometimes it's not every time you correct your child, it's not a joyful thing, and that needs to be done in order that you, again, if you take the lazy way out, the way of the sluggard in bringing up your child, when they get old, they're going to stray far from the faith. And that's an unfortunate thing. Not to say that if you do everything right, they won't stray, because they are their own individual. But they've got much better chances if we've done our job to prepare them. And the same thing with other brethren. If we each do our job, we all have a better chance of making it and being faithful until death. The job will be easier.
And like that saying that I didn't understand as a kid, but this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the physical pain that they're talking about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that I'm sure I've told you before, but when Angela we were first married, and she was teaching preschool, or she was kindergarten. She was teaching kindergarten at the time, and there was a student that she had that was just off the wall, and the mother would come pick him up and read the paper about what Johnny had done that day, the laundry list of things that he'd done, and the mother would say, well, I work all day and I only get to see him for a couple hours. I don't want to take him home and punish him, and she would let him eat cookie dough for breakfast and all, whatever the kid wanted, and you can tell from a distance that that's not going to turn out well. I don't know where that child is today. Hopefully some changes were made, but you can tell that that's not going to go well in the end. Last question to finish it out. What does he compare the young man who is enticed by the strange woman and caused to yield unto her?
An ox led to the slaughter.
Yeah. Once you get yourself into that, it's going to lead to death. And the other one is the fool to the correction of the stocks. Someone else was reading it. Was that, what did you have there for that last section there in 7? The fool to the correction of
Fetters.
the fetters. Okay, and that's the same thing as stocks. That's stocks are where you put your hands in the, you're
Yeah.
contained in, we've got a picture of me in some stocks at Colonial Williamsburg.
I looked it up, it said shackles are chains.
Yeah, yep. So, none of us wants to be in that type of a situation. So, some good wisdom from Proverbs. Next time we'll move on to chapter 8, chapters 8 and 9.
The King James Version says status.
Yeah,
I read it out of this one.
okay. I have New King James, that's where that came from there as well. everybody's classes went well and you learned a lot. So this evening, before we go, I want to just talk to you for just a few moments. And if you turn with me to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. Mark chapter 1 at verse 17. Mark chapter 1 at verse 17 says, "Then Jesus said to them, 'Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men.'" Now, as it always seems to happen with Sunday morning, Thursday night when we have our Bible study time, and then when we get to the lesson, a lot of things, the ideas overlap. And today we were talking about, not being a sluggard, and we talked about that word and talked about not being a sluggard as it pertains to our spiritual jobs that we have as Christians. And the Lord, when he was here on this earth, he was set about to do the Father's business. From a very young age, he knew his job. He knew his purpose. And here again in verse 17, "Follow me and I will make you become fishers of men." And what does a fisherman do? When you think of, my son Jonathan loves to go fishing. The joy of fishing is just a little bit lost on me, waiting all day for a fish. But there's some a good lesson to be had there in thinking of what Christ asked his people to do, to follow him, and he'll make them become fishers of men. And it involves some time. It involves some preparation. What fisherman leaves for the lake or the river or the sea without having prepared lures and perhaps made sure there's no holes in the boat, made sure that they had the proper bait to attract the fish. As we go through life and as we understand that we are supposed to be fishers of men, do we have the correct thing to attract those that need to hear the truth? As we mentioned again earlier today, that there are so many that are trying to attract men with all sorts of things. If you look around us, most of the buildings around as we drive through our towns and cities, most of the buildings that say church on the sign, even some that claim Christ, they are trying to attract people with something that is other than the truth, something that is other than the words contained in the scriptures. As the scriptures tell us plainly, that they are powerful. They are sharper than any two-edged sword. They are able to convert the hearts of men if we only use those things. But before we can use them, before we can do that, we need to make that preparation. We need to make sure that they're in our hearts, so that's what we are teaching them, that we might be able to catch a few along the way. And anybody who's been fishing knows that you can spend the whole day out there, and some days you get none, and some days you get a few. On the very rare occasion you get many. But nonetheless, if you're going to be one that is a fisher of men, you have to put the effort in. You have to put the time in. When we look at Christ's purpose, and as we've already mentioned, he wanted people to follow him and become fishers of men. Just a little further down in your Bibles at verse 38, it says, "Let us go into the next towns that I may preach there also, because for this purpose I have come forth." He knew exactly what his purpose was. And he knew that that was the purpose that he had been sent forth. Let's go over to Luke 19, which I thought I had marked in my Bible, but I guess I didn't. So Luke chapter 19. And then at verse 10. "For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost." We've got we've got those examples. We've got Matthew 28:18, which lands all authority clearly within Christ. Christ has all authority on heaven and on earth. And when he came to teach others to be fishers of men like he was. That he went out and spoke the word of truth, that some might be caught by the truth and then follow him. And then again, he mentions there in verse 38 of Mark 1 that it was for that purpose that he came forth. And so as Christians, we need to be those that are doing that same thing. If we claim the name of Christ, then we are going to follow his example. We're going to look into his word and see what his example is. And so that's my exhortation for today, that each and every one of us, when we walk out these doors, that we further our knowledge of the truth every day, that we look into the word, and that we become fishers of men ourselves, and that we help others to become fishers of men. That is the exhortation that I want to bring forward today. But also, if we turn over to Mark chapter 2, and in verses 7 through 10, I'm going to start at verse 7 to give some context here, but I'm really interested in verse 10. Why does this man speak blasphemies like this? This is at verse 7 of Mark 2. Why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone? But immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they reasoned thus within themselves, he said to them, "Why do you reason about these things in your hearts? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Arise, take up your bed and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has the power on earth to forgive sins." He said to the paralytic, "I say to you, arise, take up your bed, and go to your house." The thing I want to get at there in verse 10 is that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. He's laid forth the pattern for his church in order that sins may be forgiven. If we are in Christ, it's our job to go out there and be fishers of men. If you're not yet in Christ, in order to get to that point, you need to take that bait, so to speak. You need to take the word and put it in your heart. And as Romans 10:17 tells us, that when hearing takes place, when we hear and understand, when we hear with understanding, faith comes as a result of that. When we believe that Christ is who he says he is, just as the Ethiopian eunuch did, just as those on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2, when they believed, they were sorrowful, and they repented, and they turned away from their old ways. They walked in the other direction. They confessed Christ before men and were baptized into Christ for the remission of sins. It's not enough just to get wet, but that you be baptized for the remission of sins. This is what the Lord desires of all mankind. And when those that are fishers of men, these are the things that we need to set forth out there to allow others to understand what needs to be done. We understand that once baptism takes place, we're raised to walk in that newness of life if we've been buried in the waters of baptism for the remission of sins. After having come to that knowledge, come to the belief and the understanding that repentance and turning away from sin must take place. And then Revelation 2:10 reminds us that we have to stay faithful until death. And that is where the brethren together here, as we come together tonight, we're helping each other to remain faithful until death, because we're looking into the Word together and we're learning together and we're building each other up. Just by simply having you with me here tonight, you're an encouragement to me. And I hope that the same thing can be said of each of you, that it's been an encouragement to be here. But whatever you need, if you need the prayers of the saints, that's what we are here for as a family. And we want to help one another make it to that finish line, that we might enter together into that hope of heaven. If you need to put on Christ, don't hesitate, don't wait another day, but please step forward as we stand and sing.